Educated fools from uneducated schools now. They keep changing up the rules like ignorance is cool, y'all.
Look, let me say this. Race, black and white, for example, right? These ideas, they're fairly new, okay? And I'm sure most people are aware of that are listening to me. But if you didn't, let me quickly build on that, right? The notion of black and white, okay? Technically, when these enslavers, right, went into the continent, the people that they captured did not identify as black. They did not even identify as Africans. Okay? The people, even the people who went, the captures, right, the enslavers, right, even these people technically at that stage, right, of, if you want to say the beginning of the mid-Atlantic slave trade, they weren't completely white yet. And quick, plug, man, I'm plugging this lady, right? This is actually an African-American author, Neil Irvin Painter, okay? This book is called The History of White People. But it's not, let me just give this is all a big answer there in our discussion, okay, people? So this book I find is very important. I might not agree with all her conclusions, but this is a thoroughly researched book, okay, on the history of the idea, okay, of white people and Western civilization. So she traces the origin of that idea because, as I'm mentioning to you, right, the notion of white and black, for example, in Africa, when those people, okay, even European, the term European, right, when we use it, right, in the modern context, at the time of the enslavement of these so-called Africans, right, the notion of Europe, it's not that it was new, but it was at the early stages of that idea, okay? The groups of people who we know today as Europeans, right, they weren't always Europeans, okay, in history, nor were they always white. By white, like I say, it's the idea. I'm not talking about the complexion of their skin. Nor am I, when I say black, I'm not talking, and that's part of what I want to point out to people. Most of the time, when we think of the idea of race, right, and yourself included, you say you're biracial, what you were referring to was the pigmentation of your parents, right? One of them having dark skin, right? The other having lighter skin, right? To say white. So one is white, one is black. You're talking about their skin color. And you're also indirectly referring to their, if you want to say, origin, right? Like, so by origin, I'm talking about what section or what part of the world, okay, do their ancestors, okay, originate from? Okay, so I'm assuming, if you don't mind me asking, one of your parents, right, being that you identify them as white, and they probably do too. So they have ancestry in Europe somewhere? Czechoslovakia, there you go. Right? And even worse, bro, the Czechs, okay, the people that would become Czechs, this notion of white for them, right? It's recent, okay? If you study the history of these people, okay, I don't know if that parent of yours is first, okay, and their ancestry, the history of their ancestry, these people, they weren't white, okay, during the, if you want to say, at the time when the transatlantic slave trade began, right? The Czechs, they weren't part of this greater group of whiteness, okay? Who were the people who were considered somewhat white at that time? You would say more the British, the France, right? The Portuguese, you know what I mean? Like what today I guess we refer to as Western Europe, the Spaniards, right? The Spanish, right? The rest, okay, most of them weren't part of the greater white confederation, if you want to, for lack of a better term, right? As a matter of fact, in this book, this lady here, in tracing the history of white people, right? She goes and show you, especially, and she's an African American, right? So she's doing world history, but from the vantage or the prism, the lens of an American, right? So the Irish, for example, at the early stages, right, of the transatlantic slave trade, the Irish weren't considered white. Okay, nor were the Italians. Well, certain segments of Italy, to be more precise, right? So you get it. So you see, this idea is not only it didn't exist at all time in world history. It's also an idea that develops and it's dynamic, right? White today is not what white was considered at the early stages of the transatlantic slave trade.